山下ゆかりさんによりますカーボンニュートラルとクリティカルミネラルというタイトルでお送りをしてまいります。準備が整いましたので少々お待ちください。So please welcome Yukari Niwa for her presentation. Please give her a big round of applause. よろしくお願いいたします。We are all ears, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. My name is Yukari Yamashita. I work for the Institute of Energy Economics, Japan. So today I am going to talk about actually I may be repeating the same point as my previous speakers have mentioned, but it is from the perspective of the energy economist. And I would like to congratulate the KIZUNA, the program, for the 10th anniversary, and I'm very much, it is my great pleasure to be a part of it. So I put the title A New Challenge, because it is a new challenge really for most of the people around the world. We are all striving for meeting the net zero emission or carbon neutrality by the mid-century. And this morning, the NHK was broadcasting the UNEP report. I believe it was also mentioned last year that if we don't strive, if we don't do better, we cannot meet the 2 degree or 1.5 degree objective by the mid-century. And if we don't try harder or change our attitude, we may reach the 2.8 or 2.9 degrees by the mid-century, which is actually very, very alarming. But if we don't do anything about the critical minerals, it is also alarming. I will explain that. Well, we say it is the era of energy transition. And it is because we are all aiming at meeting the UNFCCC's target, which is to become net zero emission by the mid-century. Net zero means that we will have some remaining, but we will do something about it, so it will become net zero eventually. And then we also call it carbon neutrality. That is on the right-hand side, the net zero world. And in order to get there, we need to change the way we use energy. And then that is actually shifting away from fossil energy towards the clean energy, or in other words, electricity. Electricity made from renewables, or electricity from the nuclear, and also maybe decarbonize the way we use when we use the fossil fuels. For that, we also need to change the technologies. We are currently using the combusting energy technologies, and then we need to do the power generation in a clean way. So that is called clean technologies, the renewable electricity, or the batteries, or the nuclear power, or decarbonization technologies. So that changes the challenges for a country like Japan, which is the energy importer, to address different kind of a geopolitical challenge. Currently, we are importing a lot of fossil energy. Therefore, once the energy market, the fossil energy market gets in turmoil, we face the challenge. But into the future, we need to actually establish the stable supply of electricity, and then try to save it or try to store it in a very good way. So we need the batteries. And for that, we need critical minerals. Of course, there are many other challenges, but I just stick to what is related to the critical minerals. So why critical minerals? Well, if you look on the left, it is about the transport sector. In transport sector, we normally put the gasoline or diesel and drive cars. I'm talking about cars mainly. For that, we use the internal combustion engine, ICE, truck or car. And for that, we don't really use a lot of so-called critical minerals. We use a bit of the copper, which is required also for motors, but we use more critical minerals, different kinds, like lithium, nickel, or what is the next one? The graphite. for both the electric battery-based electric cars or even the fuel cell trucks. On the right-hand side, the power generation technologies. Currently, we are burning fossil fuels or using nuclear, and then that are the bottom three. And then for that, we use a little bit of critical minerals, but if you look on the top three, the offshore wind or onshore wind or solar power, solar photovoltaics, then we need a lot more other critical minerals too, in addition to copper. So that is the reality we are facing. Because when we say decarbonization, what we do, number one, is to reduce the energy required to do the work you want to do. Okay, how much energy you need to do some kind of activity, you reduce that. It's called energy conservation or energy saving or energy efficiency improvement. That's the step one. And the second step is actually to electrify as much as possible of your energy use. And then decarbonize that electricity generation. That is the second step. And the third step, there will be a remaining emission, but then you address by doing the CCS, CCUS, or direct air capture kind of new technologies. And that is the picture of the decarbonization. And then the very important second step is we shift away from the fossil fuel-based technologies to the electricity-based technology, and from clean electricity. Well, this is not the first time that we face this kind of issue. Conflict and the supply crisis happened before. If you recall, oil crisis back in 1970s. Incidentally, this is the 50th year since the first oil crisis back in 1973. I'm sure most of you were not born, but I remember that because I was born. I'm that old. And oil-producing nations in the Middle East actually put the embargo based on what they think as hostile or not friendly. And then there was a turmoil in the supply of the oil. And then it's not only that, the supply got shortened, but not only that, because the supply is suddenly become short, that the price went up enormously. And then because most countries were using a lot of oil, we turned to coal, we turned to gas, and we turned to nuclear later. But that really, shocked our life. It influenced our life the way we do our lives, and then the inflation really affected many economies. And then natural gas, very recently, the Russian invasion to Ukraine actually cut the supply from the pipeline to the Europe of the natural gas. And then they turned to other sources like the LNG, which mainly has been imported to Asia. But then Europe started to buy around the LNG as well as other sources of natural gas. Therefore, natural gas came into the shortage, price went up, and that affected other resources like oil or coal or everything, including electricity. Because the reason why Europe wanted natural gas was because in order to generate electricity. And then the wind was not growing at a certain point year before, so they faced it already from the problem of walking away from fossil fuels. And it also hits the economy all over the world. I heard that in the United Kingdom, it was like 10 times of the year before the energy crisis, so people really suffered. Anyway, so we have experienced that very recently, that the conflicts and the supply risks do exist before, and then we are now facing that of critical minerals. Japan faced the similar type of conflict back in 2010, which was already mentioned by Takahara-san probably. And then it was the crisis on the rare earth And then we had a conflict with China, a small conflict. But then suddenly they stopped, they put embargo on the critical, the rare earth, and then we really suffered because we were dependent on China supply 90% of our needs. So we put in the many strategies. We try to diversify the sources. We try to economize the use of it, and then we develop the recycling system. And then we try to develop technologies which doesn't require rare earth as much. These are the four methods which can put in place for other critical minerals as well. But we cannot really address the price hike once the embargo has taken place and then we face the supply shortage. So it happened back in 2010. The price actually became 5 times as much. So embargo or supply, the risk and the shortage is really will really cause a turmoil. And then we are actually in this boat together because we are aiming at net zero by 2050. Whole world has to address that, otherwise it won't be achieved. The climate change is a funny issue. It is a global challenge. If one country doesn't make it, we won't make it. So we have to question that the critical mineral issue is the global issue. So recently China has done a little bit of export control of gallium and galvanium because of the tension between the US and China. And that kind of conflict between two countries can also implicate others. We are connected together in the world. So that is very great because we are connected, we can actually collaborate also, not only conflicting or fighting each other. So next slide please. So what is this issue of critical mineral, uneven distribution? These are, on the left-hand side, these are the minerals we expect a lot of consumption will be necessary into the future if we electrify everything. If you look the second from the right, the platinum group, 90% exists in the South Africa, for example. Or if you look the second from the left, cobalt, it is very well known in the Congo. So these are the raw ores, the raw materials, raw minerals, which exist in one country or two countries, only a few countries. But the issue is not only that, it is also the issue for the processing. Very often, the processing capacity exists in other countries. Like this is the example of nickel. The primary nickel production is more or less in Indonesia. More than 1/3 is from Indonesia. But when it comes to refinery capacity, it actually is in China, 34%. So we have to look both upstream and the midstream and downstream of this whole supply chain. Here is another example. These are the other resources, and this is for the downstream processing capacity. The red is the famous China, but there are many other countries which are doing it, and yet many the resources like cobalt or rare earth or how do I read it? The polycrystalline silicon, very more than 60%, even 70% or 80% capacity resides in China. That is what we are talking. Of course, the reason why the China has that much of a lot of capacity of the refining is because China has the low cost and China has a large domestic market. It is out of necessity. They need it, and yet we will also need it into the future. So that is why we are talking about securing the supply chain, including China, but also somewhere else, the rest of the world. We, the Institute of Energy Economics, do energy forecast every year. Last year, we tried out the analysis on the critical minerals based on our economic outlook. Here is the example for nickel and lithium, which are both very much important for the battery technologies. And the red, very thick line, the topest red, is the demand curve for one of our scenarios, which we call advanced technology scenario, where we assume that the advanced technologies will be accelerated and into the market, or also we strengthen the policies of the climate change policies or environment policies or energy policies as much as possible. So the demand will actually go into the future increase, because we are addressing this challenge of carbon neutrality, so we electrify as much as possible. But then the supply, the lower, the thinner line of red is the supply curve. So the demand will surpass the supply maybe by mid-2030s. This is based on the current available knowledge or information. Therefore, if we change our policy, if we advance the technologies, the gap may become smaller. But this is just a warning signal that based on the currently available information, we may face the shortage of supply of nickel by 2035, and for the lithium by 2030, sometime in the 2030s. So this is what we are talking about. More electrification, more cleaner electricity, then we need more critical minerals. But so far, we have not been in that world. Therefore, development of the resources may not be enough to catch up with the speed of the increase of the demand. This is a little bit more complex figure, but I'm sure you will understand. The y-axis, if you look at the upper zone, these are the minerals which may become in shortage in the long run. This is comparing the supply and demand up to 2050, the cumulative demand against the cumulative supply or the resources plus recycled materials. Therefore, in the long run, the whole cumulative supply may not meet the demand is this CO and Ni. So CO is cobalt, and then Ni is nickel. So these two are in danger because we expect the very acute increase in demand for these two resources, while the supply, if it stays based on the current information, it will be in shortage in the long run. Other dots, if you look on the x-axis, it is the timeline. There is a supply and demand, at each point of time. Therefore, there might be a danger for the Dy and Nd, the dysprosium, and Nd, the neodymium, to be in shortage somewhere between now and 2030, as well the cobalt upstairs. So you look on the old timeline and which resource may become in shortage because of the development plan, etc. We see that may happen depending on the demand, the increase in demand. But this is just a piece of information for you as an example, because people are moving. Many countries are developing more upstream production, so it may change, and then more people are maybe accelerating their effort to meet the net zero, and that will increase the demand. Let us look at the globally what is happening. The right-hand side is examples of what they are doing in the US or in Europe. Strategies in place, resource conservation or recycling policies, measures are in place, and then they are also expanding supply or stockpiling, and they also try to do international cooperation, including bilateral ones, the Takahara-san just mentioned. US and Japan also struck some agreement on the bilateral the collaboration. And then I was in Washington, D.C., and IPEC also talks about the supply chains, securing the supply chain for the critical minerals. G7 mentioned in this year, Japan was the chair of the G7, and then they came up with a 5-point plan for the critical mineral security. And then it's very difficult to forecast how much demand will be there, how much supply will be there, but we need to understand that we need to have some data or numbers that in the long term, how much will be needed and how much will be supplied. And then that is the number one they have to do. And then develop resources accordingly, and then the supply chains accordingly. Because it is not only the raw materials, but also the process, the products are required. And recycle more, because it is also very important. You recycle, which has already developed, put in the commercial products, and then thrown away. You have to retrieve that and then recycle, and then you don't need to do the additional investment. Same with innovation. The technological innovation will make it more efficient use of the critical minerals, and then also be prepared of any sudden supply disruption. It happened with natural gas, and all the world was very shocked. Well, coming back to Japan, we learned a very hard lesson back in 2010, but we are still dependent on just a few sources of many different minerals. Lithium, more than half on China. Nickel, just a few countries, Indonesia, Philippines, New Caledonia, so forth and so forth. So we still need to strive to make our supply secure. So that is what we have done after 2010. And I have already mentioned, you try to save the materials we need in certain technologies. We also try to secure the supply elsewhere than the embargoed country, and then we also try to advance the technologies so that we can economize as much for the use of the critical minerals, and then we collaborate with other countries. So this is the trend of the dependence on China for the rare earth. We did very well by 2012, but then it is loosened up, or maybe the demand is more, that we are still dependent on China. So it is, it won't go away, but we have to be aware of it as a consuming country. So we have many policies. So we don't stop. We keep introducing different strategies or measures so that we can keep growing. Because we, Japan, is also responsible to meet the global target of net zero by 2050. So for the future, the policy drivers can be simplified as these four. First, reduce the required amount of the critical minerals, and second, reduce the import, for the importing country, they reduce the amount by doing the stronger recycling system, and then strengthen the measure to secure by develop the resources by yourself, or diversify the import source from elsewhere, and stockpiling. And then for the technological advancement, we can develop the alternative technologies so that we don't depend on the same critical minerals forever. This is the example, like the sodium-ion batteries will actually save us from depending too much on nickel. And another way is to not to ignore the decarbonization of the usage of fossil fuels. For example, like hydrogen, ammonia, what Japan is very much interested in doing and leading the world. And CCS, once the emission is done, you retrieve and put it underground. Or on the automobile side, we can also utilize the synthetic fuels or biofuels. So we should actually look into every category so that we don't depend too much on the critical minerals, because otherwise the world cannot meet the objective. But the recycling is rather complicated because they are in the smaller products and then distribute it everywhere. So to get it back and recycle and get all the materials out is a very complicated business, and it is also costly. So we need to find a efficient way to collect back these materials, which is called urban mining, and then we will try to utilize it. For the Tokyo Olympic game, we collected all these mobile phones, and then they took out the silver or gold and the copper to make our medals. And I don't know if it actually was enough from the consumers, but we did that. So it is possible to do it. And then choosing the partners, the resource development partners, is also important for the consuming countries. So you are all potential partners for the consuming countries. Well, we see a warning movement of the resource nationalism already with the critical minerals. For example, like Indonesia has already put an embargo on their nickel. Unless it is refined, it won't go out of their countries. Or the Mexico or Chile, they also are nationalizing the lithium. I hope the professor's advice will be hard, and then they won't go into the harsh nationalism, and then they go into the roller coaster on the downward trend. We are also developing, the Japanese companies are collaborating with the Japanese government, developing many resources, and Takahara-san has already mentioned their contribution in the development like that around the world. We also look into the potential of the marine resources under the sea, deep in the ocean. There are some potentials very new, and it requires advanced technologies, and it requires a lot of investment, and yet there are still the potentials in the ocean. So as conclusion, I would like to revisit that the stable supply of critical minerals is very important, but it is important not only for the importing countries like Japan, it is important for all the countries around the world if we are to meet the net zero challenge. So it is a common challenge for everybody. And then there is this risks of the supply risks exist, include because of the uneven geographical distribution and also uncertainty of the supply capacity. Uncertainty is still there, both on the demand side and supply side. And then the supply chain is not yet established. The steady supply chain is not yet is established enough. So we need to address that. So we need to develop technologies. We need to actually commercialize the recycling system. And then we also overcome all these hurdles together through the collaboration. I hope that the journey towards the net zero society, we can go hand in hand, and then we will meet it into the future. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yamashita, for the presentation. Thank you very much. So that concludes our lecture for today. Thank you to all attendees and those who participated online all over the world. Thank you so much. So especially would like to thank for three prominent speakers. Please give them a big round of applause once again. Thank you so much. So after this, we have break time.